All right, in this hour, we bring you an international focus, and one of the really big stories recently, Belgium has returned the gold tooth of Congo independence hero Patrice Lumumba to his descendants. Lumumba now was born in the 1920s in what was then the Belgian Congo. He was one of the founders of the Congolese National Movement in 1958, the first national political party after quite a violent push towards independence. His party won by a landslide, but he was dismissed as prime minister, which he claimed was illegitimate. The international community recognized a new regime, and Lumumba was executed by a firing squad under Belgian command in 1961. His body and the bodies of others were also dissolved in acid by Belgian officers, but that tooth was kept. Now, its return has raised calls for many other things stolen from Africa to be returned. Let's speak now to Research Director of the Insecure Livelihoods Project at Ghent University. That's Christoph Vogel. Mr. Vogel, thank you for being with us. Firstly, the first question that comes to mind is, I think the origin of this tooth was well known. Why did it take so long, in your opinion, for Belgium to return it? Why now?
So, thank you. Well, the tooth as such has only been discovered, so to say, or resurfaced 20 years ago. So that's already 40 years after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And then, as very often with political developments in Belgium, especially when they're of sensitive nature, there has been a very long and slow path towards in the end, organizing this restitution that we've seen yesterday and today.
All right, so from an African perspective, sometimes it's seen as, okay, they've got that old colonial mindset. You don't have to return things that are important to African nations. So you're saying it's more complicated than that?
It's indeed fairly complicated. So that, of course, it all takes place in sort of what is a very massive colonial hangover that we can observe in countries like Belgium in relation to Congo, Burundi, Rwanda, but also in similar other contexts where there is not only a kind of a lack of willingness to proactively engage with the colonial occupation and violence of the past, but also a very careful, a cynically careful approach to sort of also avoid liability and also future claims, which we've seen in the recent royal visit of the Belgian king to the DRC, where again, despite numerous calls, all that we've seen is regrets for the Belgian colonization of the Congo, while we're still short of excuses that may actually sort of trigger these more legal liabilities and so on. And so I think also the story of Lumumba and the at least a partial refusal yesterday of the Belgian Prime Minister to acknowledge the Belgian responsibility for it more entirely and in a more encompassing way have to be seen sort of in this broader refusal to actually stand liable for these crimes.
Yeah, we've seen the same from the UK, and I hope we can talk about that. But firstly, I mean, looking at the fate of Lumumba, there was a democratic election. There was fighting amongst then seemingly legitimate leaders, but we had Belgian troops there. Do you think that change? You know, often colonial, the colonial countries accused of meddling in that post-independence period. Could the course of history been very different if Belgium had moved out and allowed democracy to take its course?
That is obviously very hard to say because unfortunately there was no way to witness that. However, there is I think Lumumba is now a figure that that is in a larger line of tradition of independence leaders, of anti-colonial leaders. The most famous of whom might also include Thomas Sankara. What we know from the history that has been written about Lumumba is that he was actually, or he was likely much less radical than he has been sort of painted by, especially by Belgium, but also by the United States. So he was mainly sort of a nationalist Pan-African leader that wanted to sort of gain not just independence on paper, but a real independence for the Congolese people. So we don't know to which extent he was otherwise politically radical, or whether he had like an entirely new political and social program in contrast to everything that existed before. But we do know that he remains one of the key leaders that have actually not just pushed very strongly for Congolese independence to happen before Belgium was planning it to happen, but also a Congolese leader that has always seen his role in a pan-Congolese nationalist struggle as opposed to other leaders of the time.
Yeah. All right, we've basically run out of time, but is there anything else that you think should be in the spotlight? This was a tooth. We know Africa's natural resources have been used. Some of the sparkling diamonds in some of the tiaras of the princesses, and I mean there's a whole history here. But anything else that Africa should be focusing on in terms of restitution right now, never mind those attitudes that we spoke about earlier?
Well, I think there's two very symbolic aspects about the tooth. The first, the tooth being a gold tooth and sort of representing sort of the broader pillage of the continent and the Congo specifically. The second being that it's just a gold tooth. It's technically it's not even Lumumba's body, so it's and that shows a little bit this kind of very difficult struggle to decolonize restitution as something broader, when we see that 60 years later that all that can be gotten back is a gold tooth, while there is, for instance, there is still a lot of classified archives. We still don't know a lot of details about like to which extent and how deeply Belgium has been involved in Lumumba's murder, and I think that sort of shows like that this struggle for accountability and justice, but also restitution in a broader sense, needs to continue.
Yes, so it took 20 years just to get the tooth. How long to get the truth? Thank you very much for your time tonight. That was Research Director of the Insecure Livelihoods Project at Ghent University, Christoph Vogel.